It's so exciting.
That's how you make an entrance.
Yeah, I love it.
That's how we do. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks to everybody who's come out here in the studio. Thanks to everybody watching through these cameras out in the world of the web.
It's so exciting.
Angie Martinez.
Hello, Adam.
Hi, welcome.
Hello, friends.
How's your day? You're going full speed right now, right? This book is out.
Let me just tell you, I got up at 5 o'clock this morning because my book comes out tomorrow. So this morning I was doing some morning TV, and then I went to do an interview in Times Square, and they put me on the Jumbotron in Times Square. Only for somebody from New York understands what a big deal and how cool that is. Yeah, so I just keep looking at the video back of me on it, and I just sent it to my mother. I was like, how cool is this? So it's been a good day so far.
The big time.
Yeah.
That's it. So the book comes out tomorrow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Book, right here, my voice.
My voice.
Why was this the time to write a book and gather all this story in one place?
Well, first of all, you have to live a little bit of a life. You have to have we talked about, you have a long career as well. You have to go through some things to be able to tell some things. And I just got to a point where I felt seasoned in my career. I made this big transition. There were so many memories when I made that transition from people that would come up to me in the street and say, yeah, I remember when, you had your baby shower on the radio. Or I remember when, the Locks and Puffy were going at it on the radio. Or they have all these memories. And so during that time, I started thinking like, wow, that did happen. And oh man, that did happen. And I realized a lot of those stories, for some reason, are not well documented, like things that happen on radio, because there wasn't really social media. There wasn't at that time, 90s, when hip-hop was kind of coming of age, and so was hip-hop radio. And so it made me want to share some of those stories. And then in that, it made me want to share some of my life and some of my lessons for people who feel connected to me in some way.
Once you decided to take a shot at it, what was the hardest thing about trying to gather that into one place?
It really wasn't hard. It's just sometimes the memories, you remember how it affected you. So there'll be a moment like, I remember that time and it made me cry and nobody knows that. But I don't remember the detail of everything. So what I did was, early in the process when I was getting stuck in a few areas, I set these dinners up. So I do dinner with like all my show producers, from like my first show producer, Speedy, to Monse, to Patty Duke, to all the people that were with me throughout. And you just sit there and you kind of talk, and all the memories keep flooding, yeah. I was with like 3 of my closest girlfriends. I did a dinner with them. And they reminded me a story about Mary that I completely forgot. They reminded me of a time where Mary gave me some money so that I wouldn't be evicted out of my apartment. And I know you're like, how could you forget that? But I really did. I forgot it. And then when they told me, it all came flooding back. And I was able to write about it. So, things like that. I had these little dinners, and they helped a lot.
Did it change is there anything that, changed your perspective, or that you find that you thought about differently, not just the specifics of the details, but in connecting the dots and looking at all of this stuff together? Was there anything that just surprised you, or that you thought, wow, I see there was a different sort of pattern than what I was feeling at the time? Yeah,
you learn when you're it's like a journal, right? So if you guys do and I tell people this that I've recently, like, everybody should write a memoir. Everybody should write your story down, because when you're forced to, it makes you really look at your life and some of the choices you made. And so in writing it, one of the things I learned about myself is that I show up. When there's an opportunity, even if I might fall on my face in front of everybody, I work hard and I show up. There's been plenty of times throughout my career where you get these amazing, phenomenal opportunities that I could have been scared of or thought, oh, I can't do that. And if you look at all the stories that come up, that's like a running theme. And I never really noticed that till you write it down and you look at your life. So in that, there's I think, a lesson.
So you mentioned it quickly, but you made this point that in a world before social media, and you look at the age of people in the audience, and they may or may not know the world before social media.
27? Okay.
All right, 27 maybe. But in a world before all of this stuff, hip hop radio was the real time, not just reporting the news, making the news in the middle of the news. Like when you think back to in the 90s, that was the community's gathering point for everything.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, what
I say
that
radio was like Twitter.
Yeah.
Back then, because there was so let's say something happens tonight at the club and such gets into an argument with such and such, and there's an arrest and there's a whatever. The thing is now, it had 4 seconds later, it's on social media. Then you would have to wait a month for the magazine, or you have to wait till MTV gets the crew together, and it wasn't something that was like, there was no social media. So the only place you could get stuff right away was on the radio. And so that was our job. So when you're on the air and all of a sudden Twitter starts coming and Facebook is, and AOL. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention those other people. Just rewind that. No, but when social media starts coming, it's like, for somebody like me, I had to like rework how I did things. It took a lot of it of the advantage that we had, where we were the only source for information. We were the only source that your favorite artists, you could hear them live talking. It wasn't a clip, it wasn't a televised, pre-packaged, cleaned up. It was like you're hearing them you're hearing what Wu-Tang sounds like in the studio hanging out with Angie. You hear how they talk. Before, social media, there was really no way of artists speaking to their audience directly. So they needed outlets like us. So a lot has changed since then, and the job has gotten a lot harder since then as well.
Do you remember, sort of, and maybe not, because maybe it was just sort of built into what the thing was,
right.
But do you remember a moment of kind of realizing what that power, what that responsibility was, of like, oh, what we're doing here actually has this kind of immediate big impact?
Yeah, man, there was so many. But, I talk a lot about the whole East Coast, West Coast time in the book, because it was a real learning experience for me, that moment. And that was a moment when I realized, wow, how I handle this can actually shift something here. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's like responsibility. Then comes like the weight of responsibility. Which we should all feel. Anybody who's like a journalist or a personality, if you have a voice, there's a responsibility to your voice. But that was the first time I kind of realized it. Even when I like first announced that I was going to do the interview, I remember getting all of this energy, all of this talk, all of this chatter right away, and realizing the power of my voice.
Well, I was going to come to it in a bit, but let's talk about it. This is probably the thing that's getting the most attention out of the book right now.
Yeah.
We're talking about this interview with Tupac. So take us to, what was swirling around at that moment? What was it that got you into this interview, and then how did it play out?
Well, Tupac, when he was in prison, he was in New York, and so he would listen to the radio. And I guess he appreciated that, I never talked bad about him. I never added anything negative to any of the stories that came out. And so we were in the middle of this whole war, and everybody was very much invested, as you know, at that time. And I got a call from the label and asked me if I wanted to be in Tupac's video for I Ain't Mad at You. And I was like, hell no. They had my girl Moni Love, Moni.
That. Yeah.
So Moni Love had just went and did a cameo in LA video. This is how hostile, I know it sounds crazy now, like that we're grown-ups, but like back then, it was like a thing. Like, so Moni was in this like video and everybody was like, she's a traitor. Why would she do, I felt so bad for her. I was like, she's a nice girl actually. She's just trying to be supportive. But she got so much heat for that, and it had just happened. And then they did the Dog Pound video in Brooklyn, and the set got shot up. This is how invested and how serious it was at the time. So when I got that call, it was in that time. And I was like, no, sir, I don't want to be in your video. And so the label rep called and was like, well, can Pac call you himself? And I was like, sure, I guess. I didn't really know him. And when he did, he was like, how am I gonna be mad at a whole coast? How you sound crazy? He was so great. And I just was like, yeah, but people haven't heard you say that. Like, you need to say that out loud. People need to hear it. I was like, why don't you come up to the show? And he was shooting a movie in LA, so he couldn't, so he flew me out. He was like, well, I'll fly you out here if you want to come do it here. And I said, okay. And so when I went to LA, my intention was, I'm going to get him to say, this is going to be great. I'm going to squash the beef. I'm going to get him to say something. Because on the phone, he was like, how could I be mad at a whole coast? So I'm thinking, I'm going to be the savior.
Hero, right.
I'm going to be the hero in this story. The problem was, when I got to LA, he was, F this one and F that one, and this one is this. I mean, it was volatile. And he was brilliant, and there was a lot of greatness in it. But I knew that if I would have come home and played that interview, that the situation would have been even worse. He was great to me personally, but there were things that I felt that interview there would have been a problem. So I never aired it. I only aired about 10 to 12 minutes or something like that of the 2.5-hour interview. But I talk about it a lot in the book, and not just because it's such an iconic moment in hip-hop culture. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, but also personally, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the type of radio personality I wanted to be. I learned a lot about, making sure you go with what you, I'm glad that I made that decision. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think about that now, and I think about the fact that both Big and Pac lost their lives in that. And I think about what if I would have aired that interview? Maybe it would have happened anyway. It did happen anyway, but I would have had to wonder, did this interview, I would have had to wonder that for my whole life. And so I'm grateful that I didn't.
Well, I think we all look back. I mean, everybody who goes through whatever it is, those heated kind of moments. Look, I was working at Vibe at the time, and you're trying to make decisions on the fly that you don't, So you mentioned it before. It's interesting to think about what, there's the, particularly for you, there's the journalist side, and there's the personality entertainer side of being on the radio. And especially when you're in a situation like that where it's, where the stakes are high, how do you think through, what lens do you look through?
The lens I use is I don't go anything that morally I'm not okay with. It's like, I'll take the L. I'd rather take an L and miss an interview or miss a braiding or miss a, whatever. I'd rather take an L than do anything that I can't go home and sleep well at night. You know what I'm saying? So I always have, and I always have stuck to that. I've never just did something because I need to for ratings or because I need to because this is what's hot. I mean, maybe I have. If I look back, I probably made a couple of stupid mistakes, but nothing monumental.
Is it, I look at, looking at even the coverage of the book, but looking at, in so many ways, the way that the history of hip-hop gets told and gets looked at.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just gets reduced in these stories to sort of the sequence of beefs, right?
I hate that.
There was a story from the book. There was one of the papers that was writing about the book and was kind of like the 5 best beefs in Angie's book,
I hated that, by the way.
Tell me about...
That infuriated me.
Tell me...
Because that, by the way, is the smallest part of the book.
Right.
But, welcome to the world that we live in, and journalists feeling the pressure to, put a caption on it that's appealing to an audience. So whether it's true or not, unfortunately.
Well, I was to say, you're on both sides. You're as
a
media person, you can see what they're doing when they do that.
And I will say this. It's harder to take truth and make it appealing quickly to somebody, because everybody's attention span is short. So every journalist, whether you're a writer for a newspaper or your host or whatever you are, your job is to make people pay attention because you want to give them information that you want them to pay attention to. The problem is it's a little harder to do that when you actually have to put some work into it, and you actually have to be thoughtful and creative and like, how do I get them to care about the nuances of what's important here? Most people don't take the time to do that. So they take the quick headline, that they look for a headline in the book. Oh, she had a problem with Wendy, there's the headline. Meanwhile, it's like 3 lines in the book, but it's easier, and I get that. And I'm not to say that I don't do that sometimes, but I try to be as, as moral and as I can be about it.
So how do you look at, hip-hop then, hip-hop now? You said it was a long time ago, everybody was very young. It's, we're a full generation, decades on now. How do you, are you satisfied with the way that this community has sort of played things out? Are there things that are, are things that are frustrating? Are there things that are way beyond anything that we could have imagined?
No,
what's the compare and contrast, now and then?
I am constantly in awe of the evolution of it. I think that's the beauty of it. It's always been like that. When I was coming up and I liked, when I was a kid and I was like, I love Rakim, people ahead of me were like, you don't know what you're talking about. Melly Mel. And then it was like, oh, I love Big. And they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. It was better back. It's always better back because you have a fondness and you have a record. But the truth is, it's not always better back. The truth is that it's just constantly evolving. It's just constantly evolving. So I try to enjoy that process. I think there are great artists now. I think there were great artists in the 80s. If you ask me my top 10, it probably ranges from like the beginning of hip hop to right now, currently. So
I saw some list you did, and it had Rakim and then J. Cole.
Yeah,
both
that's
at
true.
the top of the list.
And that's how I feel right now. Like I could change in 3 months. There might be somebody else on the list. But I think it's constantly evolving.
And how about as a woman in this community, in this environment, how do you think things have or haven't changed over that time?
For women?
For women.
There's just not enough of us. That's the only thing I would say. Right? Oh, you like that? You feel me? Yeah. By the way, I have my whole crew is women, and not by choice. It's just they're all brilliant and smart and work hard. And I noticed that whenever, like sometimes I have these events, I'm like, I'm gonna do a book brunch, and I'm gonna invite this many, and then it's hard to find them, like people that, and that breaks my heart because there's so many great women, and we just need more. It benefits everybody. It benefits the messaging. It benefits the perspective. It's a more balanced, presentation when we're there and we're standing equally with men.
It's maybe a cliche question, but did you find it, more of a challenge, a different challenge, breaking in back then?
Being a woman?
Being a young woman.
It's weird because I don't know if I was like oblivious to it or it wasn't a focus. It wasn't something I was thinking about. But when I think back, I did feel like I needed to be a little extra prepared. Or, when I was younger, coming up, I used to always make sure I had these super baggy clothes on because I want to sit across from these rappers and I want to have a conversation with you. I don't want to be like, hey, it's like nobody wants to talk to you about their third verse or their producers on the album when you're like, giving them like lashes. So I was aware of that, I think, but I was really lucky also. Like my general manager, even starting, was a woman. My program director at Hot Coming Up was a woman, Tracy Cloherty, Judy Ellis. My program director at Power Now, Thea Mitchum, is phenomenal. She's vice president, I believe, of programming at iHeart. So I've been lucky. And maybe it's because I look for them and I resonate to them. But there are great women. We just need more. That's all. So it's important for us to support each other, and it's important for us to pull someone up when you can.
Real quick into a different arena, but
where are we going? Where are we going?
Tell us a little bit about your. Do
you know how hard it is for me to not try to take over the conversation?
You know what it is for me to interview somebody knowing this is what you do all day, every day?
I've been desperately trying to work on this thing about myself because I think it's almost obnoxious, right? So you go to people's shows and then they start asking you questions and then I start leading the conversation. It's not okay. It's not cool.
So then tell me this. What's the question you're waiting for people to ask you that they haven't asked?
Wow, that's an excellent question.
That was cheap, but okay.
That is an excellent question that I have no answer to right now. I have no answer. Let me think about it.
All right, think about that. In the meantime, quick, tell us about your stint on passing through American Idol.
Gosh, it was so fast.
Well, but
this is one of the headlines.
But I'm sure it was not fast. Working up to it and getting it together.
It all was fast. It was the weirdest experience ever because I got a call. They were like, Fox wants to hire a fourth judge for the second season. I'd never seen the first season because I was promoting the album at that time. So it was that fast. It was like 2 meetings with some execs, and then they were like, they want you to be the fourth judge. I was like, huh? Okay. Then I went on the road with them to a couple of cities, I think Detroit, Chicago, and then we came back to New York. And so I felt out of place. I'm not a singer. Like I had experience with artists. I could see a good artist when one came through my door, but I wasn't somebody who could say, "Hey, you're a little pitchy today, ma'am." You know what I'm saying? So I already felt a little awkward and out of place. And then there was the producers at the time were definitely trying to position me as aggressive. You know what I'm saying? And I just didn't like that. So I tell a story in the book about doing something that was against. Remember how I was saying before, I always try to stay rooted in my truth and what I want. In that moment, I allowed them to kind of push me to be somebody I wasn't a little bit. And sure enough, whenever you do that, it always backfires. So they were like pushing me to be hard on this girl, and I was. And the show after the thing, she stays and she's standing there, and I'm like, she's still here. Before she leaves, she was a Dominican girl from New York. Right.
Straight to your heart, right?
I mean, just kill me, like really. And she was like, Angie, out of everybody here, I thought you were gonna be the one to support me. Exactly. So and then I was so mad at myself because I should have. You know what I'm saying? Like I was mad at myself that I let somebody make me treat her that way. Not that I was mean or anything, but it was like, I said no for her to go to LA. So after that, and then I was pregnant. Nobody knew I was pregnant, so I was emotional. And I just like, I don't want to do this. I hate this. It's terrible. And so whatever, it didn't work out. And people always think, because then it wound up becoming this huge show, right? And so everybody's like, oh, you could have been famous all over the world and super rich. But I also would have been uncomfortable and unhappy and not in my own skin. And it's just some things are not worth it, So for me, it wasn't.
All right. Clock on the wall tells me that we've got to move from me talking up here to taking some questions from you guys. So let's start there.
Hello.
Hi, Angie. All right, so you mentioned it before that the evolution between before and now has changed.
Yeah.
So with that dynamic, what's going on now, what advice do you have to any radio or TV aspiring personalities to be the next voice of New York?
Well, you can't, because that's my slogan. I have it trademarked and everything. So you got to find, number one, you got to find your own. That's first. But it really is true. You do have to find your own. You have to find your own voice. You have to find your own thing. And then you have to work, man. That's the thing I find. It's like people just want stuff quick nowadays. I want it quick. I want to be famous. I want to be famous in 4 seconds. It doesn't happen like that. Like, it doesn't happen like that. Some people it does, and God bless them, and that they're very lucky. But the truth is, most people have to work hard. So I say, if radio or television or something like that is your thing, then really get in touch with yourself, who you are, what do you have to offer, is there truth in that, can I give the world something, and then go hard all the time. Go. You know what I'm saying? And then if you're still, I guess luck and it has to play a part of it, but I think it starts there. You know what I mean? I hope that helps.
Hi, Angie.
Hi.
You are really radio royalty.
Thank you.
And not just because, you've done interviews with Tupac and Big and stuff like that, but because you had such a great relationship with so many artists coming through. You had songs with, Little Kim and Left Eye and even Jay-Z. So
my friend Shaka says I'm like a hip-hop Forrest Gump. That's what she calls me.
Right. How do you maintain those lasting relationships? And, like today in radio, there's so much controversy. You basically were like friends, with the people that you interviewed. How did you maintain that?
Well, I think it's just about treating people with respect, really, ultimately. It's not like I go to the mall with all these people. It's not like we're like friends, It's not, it's just, you show people respect, they show it back. You build a relationship over years. It's really as simple as that. That's really it. If you know somebody for 5 years and every interaction you've had with them has been of respect and integrity, then you have a real connection. And I've been lucky enough to be in the business for a long time. When I started in New York, hip hop in New York was like everybody was here, So Jay-Z starting his career, Mary J. Blige is starting her career, you know. Wu-Tang is becoming like worldwide famous. And so I had the opportunity to meet these people early, which is great. And really, it's really that simple.
It's also one thing, I mean, when I think back to that time and being in all of that, is how small the community was back then. That it
really
was
true.
A couple of labels, everybody knew
One
everybody.
One radio
station. I mean, it was like there was a little pocket
No
of
social
people.
media. So if you're like a record promoter, at some point you have to talk to me.
Right, and for an artist, there were a handful of places. There weren't 50 people lining up doing interviews for every site and every blog and every, you know, it wasn't in the regular media and all the rest of that. There were just a couple of places to go. So it was a really different, I mean, for better, and it also meant these were people you were seeing all the time, everywhere, over and over. It was a whole other dynamic.
Whole other dynamic. And that took some adjusting. And I talk about that in the book also. It's like, there were periods where I would have to adjust to change and rework what I'd learned and use it in new ways. You know, the radio personality I was at, 22 or 23 is not the radio personality I was at 27 or at 30. Like, you have to evolve. You have to evolve with the times. You have to evolve to what's current, and I think that's a big part of it.
Angie.
Hi, love.
I wanted to know, how does it go, how you said that you started working with, interviewing Jay-Z. So how does it go from interviewing Jay-Z to being signed to Rock Nation?
Ow. The thing about Jay is that the conversation to be, for his company to manage me didn't even happen with Jay. But the thing is that not just Jay, there's a whole community of people that support Jay, that have been with Jay for many years, that I'm also friends with. So whenever they have an event or do something, they were always like family anyway. So actually, Rock Nation was doing an event to raise money at I think it was the Garden or the Barclay. And they were like, Ange, will you come host this for us? And I was like, sure, yeah. I'm backstage, and Desiree from Rock Nation is there. And we said to her, you guys should just manage me. And she was like, we should, right? And I went about my day, and she called me back. She was like, I spoke to Jay. He thinks we should too. I was like, perfect, let's do it. But it was really as simple as that. I think that he has a great team up there. He didn't become Jay-Z just by himself. I mean, of course he's amazing and talented and everything, but it's a great team there, and people that I've had relationships with for a long time. So it all kind of comes together that way. Sure.
We can do one more. Here we go. One more.
Hey, Miss Angie.
Hello.
I'm kind of starstruck right now.
Stop it. Will you stop it right now?
Oh, I got two questions. So who did you interview that made you starstruck? And my second question is, will we see an Angie Martinez TV talk show in the future?
I hope so. I don't know, talk show in a traditional sense. Listen, I know that for the rest of my life, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to work, I want to do things that make me get my juices, you know what I'm saying? I want to do stuff. So I don't know in what capacity that would be. I wouldn't be surprised. I would hope that I could, do that. But I definitely, TV, film, writing, more books, like all of that, I want to try anyway, And the second question, who made me starstruck? That's a good question. I feel like it happens first of all, Oprah Winfrey, the president. He almost passed out at the White House. I was so in awe and freaked out and shaking.
That still Oprah comes in ahead of the president, though.
Oprah. If you read the book, you know that Oprah is in my mind, she's like my godmother. who whenever I'm stuck, I think, what would Oprah do? This is not me trying to be funny. This is real life, I'm telling you. In my real life, almost every day, I would think, what will Oprah do? And a lot of times it's the right thing. She helps. It helps. Use it.
All right. Everybody, thank you for the audience. Thank you, AOL Build, around the web. Angie Martinez, My Voice is out tomorrow. Thanks for coming.